This is DMG, welcome to Quest Givers, and this is my friend
DM Scotty.
And this is an interesting video that we feel most new GMs and DMs need to take notice of, and that is how to present different choices and how to limit them in scope.
If you're looking for adventure, excitement, thrills, and a dice-rolling good time, sit back and enjoy the next few minutes with Quest Givers DM Scotty and DMG. They're taking you on an epic journey through the role-playing experience every Friday. Learn the ways of the Game Master, the Dungeon Master, and delve into the minds of the players. Grab the modules each month to support the channel and play the campaign with your gaming group. You're sure to get hooked on adventure.
In order to help the production of future videos on this channel, check out our website, questgivers.com, where you can have a look at merchandise and purchase modules that will eventually also become a Kickstarter on September 1st. Scotty, this is one of my favorite things, is presenting choices to players because they always get it wrong. One of the key things about role-playing games is you wanting to be giving player choice. And we will do a whole video on player agency and player choice, but we're going to talk about choices specifically in this video.
There are several things I'd like to talk about with that, as far as like throwing too much at your players, right? You want the choices to be clear and that kind of thing. You want them to have choice. You don't want to make it like a railroading, but give them choice, but make the choices clear. Like there's something going on over here and you see this here and you see this here. Don't, try to do 1,500 things at once and, they're just like, I don't know what to do. What do we do now? Because the worst thing you can have at your table is to throw too much at the players and then they can't, they're kind of like, well, what do we do? Make those choices kind of clear and interesting, actually, so that they want to engage and, not just sit there kind of, what do we do? What do we do now? Draw them in, to make those choices.
It's really about goal setting, I think. When you present information to the players, you're presenting potential goals for them to set for their characters in the specific scene that you're describing. So if you describe a scene for 10 minutes, you're putting a lot of information in there, which is creating a huge amount of goals for various players. You might go on and on about how the beautiful bookcases are, in the corner, and the light just hits the bookcases and the beautiful colors and so on and so forth. And of course now, naturally, the players are going to think, well, these bookcases are important. Now, they may not be important at all, but you could now spend an hour with people wanting to roll and do research checks and find out more because you've put a bookcase into an area where there didn't really need to be the bookcase. Now, you could say, right, you're in a library and there's a man running up the stairwells opposite from you. So you're in a library. A person then concocts in their mind, what does a library look like? There's a whole bunch of rows of books and whatever. But the most important information you've said is there's a man running up a stairwell. Who is this man? Should we find out who this man is? Where does the stairwell go? We haven't focused on the fact that there are books. We've said we're in a library, so you may have said, well, we can come back and have a look at these books once we've followed the man. So you're setting the scene in a way that you're creating interesting goals that are, again, like we talked in the previous video about, the moral imperatives and duty and all these kind of things. But this is on a micro scale. For each separate scene, you're dropping in things that's actually going to then give the player a choice as to what goal they want to attack first. And I've watched a lot of Scotty's game, and Scotty does this very, very well. It's something I try to get, and that's to be very succinct in your descriptions.
Oh yes, Gareth, I totally agree. You can be too verbose with your descriptions, and it can just be too much and just overwhelm the players. You want to give short, concise descriptions, without too much to clogging up the player's mind, and they just kind of get befuddled and don't know what to do. So make the things clear. And if you describe too much of a certain thing, they might begin to think that that's important, right? When really you're just going on and on about the description of just a particular piece of furniture. It doesn't have any relevance to the thing or the adventure or anything. But it can draw the players in. They might become obsessed with like, oh, there's a secret compartment in there. He talked so long about it. There's got to be a secret compartment or something with it. So be careful about that, right? Be careful about that. Now, one thing I do is I use a lot of terrain in my games. I also do theater of the mind, so it's not mandatory, but terrain can be very concise as far as like, what you see in the room, right? So you walk in and there's actually this here and this here and this here. And, one thing I do is I continue to add things as the players notice. I don't necessarily put everything down like a board game. I'll add things as the players notice them in the room. So that's a nice way that you can do that, even with terrain, because when you describe the stuff to the players that's going to draw their attention, you're kind of, maybe starting with the biggest stuff first or the stuff they notice first and then kind of working your way down. Well, with the terrain, that's kind of already done for you on the table, right? But as they go in there, maybe there's something they didn't notice. There's something under here or there's something over there or whatever. And you can, and it's perfectly fine to add that stuff after the fact, after they come in and start to, digest the room.
You touched on the terrain aspect there. And one of the things I've said numerous times, don't put something down there that you don't want the players to interact with, because they're going to find it and go, ooh, you've put a chest in the corner. I want to know what's in the chest. If you just put it on there just for standard mise en scène and you just wanted some clutter to make it look cool, that's great. But when you put things in there and you put in a pedestal and you put in a chest and whatever, you're creating items of interest in this area that the players are going to fixate on. And trust me, they will fixate on it. You put a chest in a corner, they are going to head for that chest. Doesn't matter who the players are, I guarantee you they're going to head for the chest. First thing they're going to think is it's a mimic, and then they're going to think it's an actual chest. And all you did was plonk this thing down. It has nothing to do with what you were setting up at all. So that's very important, is when you don't necessarily need to concentrate on being succinct in your description, but be succinct in the terrain that you put down. And if you look at a lot of Scotty's early crafting videos, what's great about them is that they are quite succinct in detail. You don't have a huge pile of things that are in the room. I tend to do that, but when I put things in the room, I put them in there for a reason. So a lot of my players, I like people to investigate an environment heavily. And so my style is different from Scotty's, but his epitomizes more what I'm talking about in terms of being succinct visually.
And things will change and get the player's attention as the scene progresses. So say the guy in the library who ran up the stairs, ran up a single file stairs, right? Do you want to chase somebody up a single file stair, just one at a time, and who's going to go first and this kind of thing? And all those kind of choices and decisions might slow you down and give the guy a chance to escape. So that's all interesting, that kind of things that draw the character's attention, right? And like I said earlier, with the terrain, I always add little bits and pieces that the players may not necessarily see on the first inspection, just like you would when you're describing a room and they notice stuff as they enter the room. So don't be afraid to do that with terrain also. It works great.
Yeah, when you think about the what I call the 7 pillars of role-playing, but WotC calls it the 3 pillars of role-playing. But the pillars of role-playing, one of them is exploration. And revealing things physically by putting them down is a reward for exploration. And so when you make exploration a goal that the player can set for their character, you are going to be rewarding them not necessarily with experience, but with information and with putting down interesting looking objects that you've crafted. And I think that's, as a DM who uses terrain and that sort of thing, I think that's really important to begin to develop that skill of when to put things down, when to mention things. You could walk into this library and see a man running and not mention the stairs, and he disappears around a corner. You may then get them to do a senses check or a perception check, and then they hear footsteps on a stairwell going up. So you can twist and change the way you're adding information into the game. And if your players like rolling dice, make checks out of it. If they don't like rolling dice and they're more role-playing sort of people, then drop a lot more of those elements in that's going to give them a role. I deftly scramble across to try and chase the man up the stairs, that kind of description, as opposed to I'm going to roll to see if I can catch this guy. Both are completely valid ways of playing, and you expect that you may even have two different types of players in your game. One will be a role player and the other one will be a role player, and they kind of have to coexist. So you as the DM, then part of the skill set you need to develop in that situation is how do you satisfy both of those. And that's where I like strict turn orders, because strict turn orders allow each person their own little space to do their thing, and it doesn't really affect the other players. If someone's going to do a 10-minute soliloquy, just say, look, all turns are 1 minute in length at a maximum. Gives the guy to roll, he can roll, do his check, and then the next guy can do his acting, and then the next person can do their roll, etc. And this just helps the game move along and play out in a nice way. Everyone gets a turn.
One thing I do in game is I call it kind of due diligence, right? If a player is kind of doing what they're good at, if they're a skilled player with history, if they're looking at books looking for history, or maybe even a thief just looking for stuff, you don't have to make checks for everything, right? Sometimes that just slows the game down. So if it's not something that's going to have a major consequence, just let them do it, especially when they're looking for information, because information and those kind of choices in the game that the players make regarding what they pay attention to, really enhances the game. And if you make that dependent on a check and they don't get it, it doesn't make the game cool because it's a mystery necessarily. It actually, I feel it makes it less cool because you're not getting the information you need. Now it's legitimate to have them make a check and say, oh, maybe there's extra information you don't find out that might help you defeat the enemy. That could be really cool, and that's worth doing the check. But just the basic kind of information that they could get from just their senses and perusing and doing their normal activities, you shouldn't penalize them for that with checks. And I call that in my game due diligence. If a player does due diligence, I generally just allow them to do things. So yeah, don't get hung up on that, because it's really cool about what they see, in the environment, what they notice, and how they interact with everything.
Yeah, don't hide vital information behind a check that can fail. So, if it's very important that they see the secret passage, don't hide that behind a check, because then there's no way for them to get out. That they must just notice it. And building upon what Scotty has said, what I like to do, especially with strict turn order, is I reveal a piece of information with each player. So the first player gets a chunk of information. You're looking around the library and you see a man running. And then the person, okay, well, where's he running towards? And I give some further, he's running towards a stairwell. I decide to chase him. The next player, okay, I see this guy running and Bob is chasing him. And you see Bob chasing and off to the side, you notice a shadow against the wall that Bob has not noticed. What do? So you're now introducing more information. The first character has reacted to and created a goal based on the information you've presented to them. You're now adding additional information to a second player. And what this helps to do as you move along is you're involving each character in their own way in the story, creating goals and motivations. Now this character goes, I see the dude with the shadow, so I suspect that it's an assassin because we've been dealing with assassins the whole game. So I ready my bow and I shoot towards that direction. I then move to the next character and say, okay, you notice the shadow on the wall, and and Sarah has taken the shot and Bob is chasing the dude up the stairs. What do you want to do? Well, before you say that, you say, you hear a pigeon rising up into the air from behind one of the bookshelves, all right? That's off to the side near the assassin. So now you've created more information. There's someone else there. okay? And then they can then build upon what they want to do. Now, they may also shoot, they may also chase, or they may want to investigate what's happening with this pigeon. It's a dynamic environment that things are changing, and so people are having to make quick decisions. Now, the first player, because it's a strict turn order, the first player is like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm chasing this guy. There's probably an assassin there. There's probably more people behind me, okay? And then the third player decides, I'm going to shout out, hey, there's more people coming from behind, and then dart down the side of the bookcases to find out what disturbed the pigeon, all right? So you create a dynamic environment, which in the beginning, if you describe to everybody, there's a guy running up the stairs. There's a party who go, well, we're all going to just chase this guy up the stairs. Nothing wrong with that. But I think the second way is a lot more interesting and a lot more dynamic. Yes, you can get heavily bogged down in a scene, but when you're allowing each player to have their own little story, their own little thing that's happening, this basically opens up the game to a lot more player investment. And that's key to keeping your game going for months, years, decades, etc. Players investing in your world, investing in the story, investing in the game. And that's critical. And by keeping your choices succinct and presenting them in a succinct way, and thinking about, if I present more information to each character as it continues along, how is this going to change? Now, you experienced that in the Tilvertonians. When I did that, when you guys all started, each person started in a separate way around the same area, and it just built up the information as you go. So you've experienced that. What did you think of that as a player rather than as a DM?
Yeah, that was really fun and dynamic. And Gareth, you threw a lot at us very quickly. So we had these, choices we had to make, and it quickly became apparent to me that the town was going to be lost, right? And I had focused on something that was happening in the game. You should check out the video; it's pretty fun. Something that was happening in the game where it was this interesting character, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. But one of the characters, who was a goat herder, wanted to defend the town. The town's lost. Like, the guards are falling, orcs are flooding in. It's a horrible disaster. And my character, something's going on with this character that's presented itself, this choice, this meaningful choice. And let's go with this and see what happens. Let's go down this rabbit hole and see where it takes us. So that was a super fun game. And that's just making those choices meaningful and interesting. But they're a bit limited. Like, we didn't have time to wander around and just talk with all the people on the street. It was happening now, and we had to make quick choices. So it kept it very interesting and dynamic.
What it also helps with is when you're doing perception and investigations and things, people are perceiving different things. So what I like to do is one person hears something, the next person sees something, and the next person smells something, or reverse the orders, So a perception check is you smell a delightful perfume wafting towards you from the darkness, And then the next guy has dark vision. He's like, well, I see this hag coming towards us. And the third person is like, I heard some cackling laughter. You've built up a whole scenario based on different perceptions. So, because the problem is the first person to roll the check wins, right? They win, they get the experience. But so how do you reward the other players? So you've got to think about that. When you're giving out little pieces of information, you're building up this dynamic structure of the imagery, the smells, the sounds, all that kind of thing, and giving players more of an experience. And I think that's extremely important in role-playing, to get to the essence of what role-playing actually is, and telling a cooperative story. It's not necessarily your story, it's the player's story about how they attacked the world that you're presenting, how they solved the problems that you dropped in front of them.
And with the choices, I love adding that, you can do that with perception checks and everything. You can have one person who's the nearest to something see something, and then they see it, and then, as the next character, maybe they notice something and this kind of thing. So that's always fun to start, presenting those interesting choices, on each player's turn. So it's not like, oh, the player's kind of waiting. They're actually kind of waiting for their turn because they might see something that the rest of the party didn't notice. If you start doing this kind of technique, then they'll start noticing things that the other players didn't notice, and they're going to be excited for their turn, right? It's not just, oh, it's my turn. Okay, I swing and attack the thing, and blah blah blah. They're getting some new information, to make a meaningful choice during their turn. So that's always super fun.
And it builds up the tension. And the part of the most important piece of drama is usually tension. So when you're adding more tension, you're adding more drama. You're adding more drama, you're adding more interest. Hopefully this video has helped you with how to present player choices and to limit them. We'll talk more about these sort of things in future videos. But thank you for joining us. And of course, check out our website for all kinds of cool merch and to purchase modules to help support this channel. See ya.
Hey, thank you for joining us.